Hi, everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Petri Järvilehto. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Seriously. And when we started building up Seriously, we started with the idea of how do we get the world's best creative talent working together to create an IP, to create something that could be bigger than just a game. And then we started reaching out to people and building this amazing group of people together to create Best Fiends, which launched last year, and right now, every day, over 1 million of hours of gameplay is being spent within the Best Fiends game. And to create the emotion, the music, the experience, an integral part of the experience, we were lucky enough to get an incredible star to work with us, Mr. Heitor Pereira. Let's give a warm applause to Heitor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I thought it would be a great idea to have a chat on first, let's talk briefly about your background, and then we can talk more about how we were creating the audio and the music for Best Fiends, how you approach the creative process.
Right.
And you've been composing music for over 40 movies with more than 4 billion of revenue attached to those.
Yeah, it's crazy, $4 billion or more than that.
But let's talk a little bit about how did you get started with music, where it all began.
I come from the south of Brazil, and from my mother's side in the family, the majority of my uncles, they are musicians. So from a very young age, I was introduced to really the power of music and how it kind of touched people. And I will never forget when they brought me for the first time to a carnival, party, and they were playing, and they had to hit me behind like the surdo that plays the, and when they start playing the music, people went like, wow. And I said, wow, I think right there I realized I wanted to do that, because it alters people's states and to a positive way. And I'm so happy that I can be here talking to you, and having gone through this journey that started right there with, just music being my, my muse.
And if you look back at your career, you guys had an incredible success with the band Simply Red back in the day, and then you started moving towards working with animated properties and films.
Right.
And can you talk about what it's like to work on what are some of the best experiences working with, say, the Minions or Despicable Me or similar properties?
Well, I think the best experience, it's when you eventually get to the movie theater, or in our case, you see somebody actually living, the results of all our work, be it in mobile or as in the case of the Minions or the Despicable Me's in the movie theater. I think, in a way, for you to be present when people are enjoying the results of this work that has been done for so many people. You guys, know how collaborative our industry has to be in order to become successful. You need to be welcoming to other people's ideas and how to turn those ideas into a better solution for your field. In my case, if Petri has, a couple wishes, and he uses certain adjectives, to represent that, somehow I have to translate that in music, but eventually, it lands on the families that come and watch those movies, or everybody that it's, and the bus, in Brazil, I say because it's big, the mobile games, in Brazil is enormous. So, you see people experiencing it, and to me, that's the result of of all this work and the proof of the success, when they really get transported in something a different place in their mind, you know.
And something that you actually mentioned last night when we were talking, which was really interesting. You mentioned like in terms of building your career as a composer, you had the option of going towards like, let's get 3 movies into production at the same time,
right,
and kind of like build that into a hectic production thing, or then you could just like focus on some of the few things that you really care about. And how do you manage that balance?
Well, I think at some point that balance means you have to be courageous enough to say no, you know, and to really invest on your yes, you know. So, you know, what's the point of having 10 projects and then doing 10 bad things? So you rather than dedicate yourself to fewer ones, you know, but give all your best to it. And that's how kind of I try to guide my life through this, and it has been good up to now.
And kind of adding passion projects in between, like say, I understand you're pretty passionate about football.
Football.
Is there something you can tell us about this project?
Yeah, you know, this project, for example, it's ASCAP introduced me to this project called America Scores. It's been going on for about 35 years or so in South Los Angeles with inner city kids, and joins soccer and poetry. But because we had the World Cup, they invited me to write a melody, so we could use the poetry of the kids and become lyrics for a song, you know. And it's been an amazing thing. Because, you know, in the end, you know, now you are all grown-ups, like I am, you know, but as in your first question, which all of you have your answer to, you know, this thing started at some point. Somebody had to plant that seed in you, you know, with all your hopes, what you want to do with the gift that you've got. And I think everybody has a gift. So a child's right in education is to have access to the discovery of that gift, you know. So a program like that, I invest a lot of my time to it, because I really believe, coming from a country that, you know, we still need to get a lot, you know, in terms of achieving more education to a majority, to a bigger number of people, then it's something that really resonates a lot to my heart. So to be part of that project is one thing, positive, you know, to my heart. But also to do things like, you know, I just finished a project on the pollution of the sound pollution in the ocean, and how has, unfortunately, lately disorienting, you know, the migration of whales and dolphins and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, and how important this is. So, okay, we do a very successful project, you know, and we get to a lot of people. But to me, a project like this, or the one about the whales, or many other ones, the success is to eventually, through the gift that was given to me, you know, to communicate through music, that we can do a little bit to our lives as humans, but also to the ones that don't have a voice. So, you know, in general, nature. I'm crazy for birds. You know, I travel the world, you know, looking for, you know, different birds, and, you know, I bring my kids, my wife, and we just look into it, which I always also put into projects like ours, you know, in the movies. So it all, in the end, you know, becomes one thing, you know. So.
And let's talk about a bit kind of along similar themes. Let's talk about when we started the creative process for the Best Fiends IP, and we flew over to Los Angeles, and we were at your studio talking about it. And we wanted to create a sense of journey, but also a story of rescue, and kind of we have these little characters that are growing up through that experience, and reclaiming the world back from slugs. One of the things that we have been talking quite much is how do we create a universal sound for the music. If Best Fiends is now launching in Korea, it's launching in China, and there's huge amount of players or in all over the world playing,
Right.
playing the game every day. And you had a bunch of very good ideas on how do we approach creating something that resonates globally for everyone.
Yeah, I think as a musician, very early on, let's say I read your script and I saw your graphics before they actually could move. The same thing happened to both Despicable Me's and the Minions movies. You know, quite frankly, I get my iPhone and as I'm reading, you know, the script, you know, I have a guitar or a little keyboard and I'm already writing the music right there. You know, but one thing that I'm very conscious constantly is that this music shouldn't have borders. You know, it shouldn't represent one country. You know, you guys are here in Finland, he's Finnish, I'm Brazilian. You know, these movies and games travel the whole world. So why would I put some sort of like such a strong musical geography that then it makes very clear to the listener that there is, you know, a country like that. You know, I rather take the elements of, you know, music, you know, as a global, you know, symphony, sort of speak, you know, and mix all up. And I think in doing that consciously, you eventually, by practicing it, you know, you tend to help the projects to become more international. You know, so, you know, everybody, for example, you know, the game, anybody in China or in Brazil or in America or somewhere here in Europe, you know, could be playing, and in case they listen to the music, they should feel that inside the bus, you know, the train, as they are playing, you know, they don't transport themselves to an existing geographical place. They go to the place where that game is happening, where that movie is taking place. It's an imaginary place. And I think in doing that, you can make a more universal score for it. So it's a conscious decision, you know, and I think it's a responsibility towards the international intent of all the games and movies that we in the industry, you know, are trying to get involved with. You know, the conscious that when you start writing something, you are writing not only for the city, for the country that you are right there and then, you know, but for the whole planet as much as you can. You know, you gotta think big. You know, if you enter something, you want to succeed. So I think the whole world. Why not?
And if you look at, I think you can also hear it in the sound, in terms of like the music for Best Fiends was created like, we were in Helsinki, we'd be talking with you guys in Los Angeles and you'd be directing an orchestra in Budapest.
Right.
And kind of the entire production, all of that even like happening online in real time, all the recordings and everyone kind of being able to stream that experience, and you guys directing the conductor in Budapest. And
yes, and I think, yeah, well, that's one of the, to me, the reasons of to the success in a way, to the international success, is the fact that, as I said in the beginning, you have to really mean that you are taking your producers and directors, you know, comments, you know, and really add them, you know, to your music. Find a way, you know, you are the musician, in my case, then, you know, I do justice to their comments and trying to give a musical representation of that, the best it can be. But in doing that, as you said, you know, you are from here, I'm from Brazil, they recorded in Budapest. I think, yeah, again, you know, it's the process itself proves that there is no way you can be writing a script nowadays for a video game or a melody for a video game or a movie and be thinking only about like the place where you are right now. You know, you have to be consciously, constantly, you know, thinking of a global audience. You know, because this is what we want ultimately. You put all your heart into this, you know, and here is an opportunity, you know, to really show that. So you do that by thinking big. Because I think what attaches all of us in the end is the humanity behind it. It can sound like a little piegas.
Starting to run out of time, but I think leaving you guys, leaving everyone here with the foremost thought of think big, think universal is certainly something that's
why I came here. Yep. I could have stayed in Los Angeles, but I came here to talk a little bit and play some of the music for you. It's my pleasure.
Everyone, thank you. Heitor Pereira, thank you.
Thank you. Super. Thank you.